NES is one of Nintendo's most iconic consoles. It single-handedly revived the video game industry after the great crash back in the 80s. However, the console had one major weak spot: the cartridge connector mechanism. Over time, it proved to be unreliable. We've seen some quote-unquote upgrades, but those had issues too. Well, it looks like we now have a new solution from Rocker Gaming and Blue Shell 3D, called the Ninten-Drawer, which is honestly the most over-engineered cartridge connector I have ever seen. And I love that. So, let's take a look. Hey everyone, how's it going? My name is Tito and welcome to another episode of Retro Renew. Today I am super excited to check out an all-new mod that promises to be the end-all, be-all cartridge connector for the NES. This is the Ninten-Drawer, created by Rocker Gaming and Blue Shell 3D. It's a replacement to Nintendo's original cartridge connector mechanism that unfortunately hasn't aged well. Those familiar with the console know just how finicky these can be when trying to get games to read properly. Over the years, these old 72-pin connectors become less and less reliable until they either need to be completely serviced or replaced altogether. Some solutions have been introduced over the years, but it seems that they fix one problem only to create another. For example, the blinking light win from ArcadeWorks gave us a more reliable cartridge connection, but also the dreaded death grip, with games being seemingly impossible to remove without some assistance. The Ninten-Drawer addresses all these issues and then some. It's been over-engineered to the extreme with magnets, a sliding mechanism, a built-in CIC lockout bypass, and of course, loading games reliably every time. It looks to be like one of the most reliable cartridge connectors that you can get for the NES. So let me turn it over to the creators of the Ninten-Drawer to learn a bit more about them and why they made this really neat mod for the NES.
I'm Rocker Gaming.
And I'm Alex from Blue Shell 3D.
And we created the Ninten-Drawer.
Almost a year ago, I got this message from Rocker.
Yeah, so I sent Blue Shell 3D a message, and I told them that I wanted to create a 72-pin connector we could be proud of and doesn't have death grip. So we went back to the drawing board, and what we came up with was way beyond a normal 72-pin connector.
The Ninten-Drawer replaces the problematic ZIF connector with a straight shot from the cartridge to the slot, increasing reliability and reducing that dreaded blinking red light.
Pair that with a unique slide drawer mechanism and magnetic clasp, and what you have is a broken death grip, which is commonly associated with third-party solutions, while giving the user a satisfying click reminiscent of an OEM level of feel.
Finally, add custom electronics and swappable nameplates, and you have a customizable and region-free solution that we affectionately call the Ninten-Drawer. Back to you, Tito.
Awesome, thank you both for sharing that. So the Ninten-Drawer looks like it's a fantastic way to enhance the NES. It's got a ton of great features and appears to be a fix for a lot of the problems that inhibit the console. So let's dive in and check it out. Alright, so in this video, I'm going to go over all the parts that come with the Ninten-Drawer kit. Then I'll show you just how easy it is to install it into your NES, go over all of its features, review the pros and cons, and of course provide you with my overall thoughts. So the kit itself is pretty simple. You get the Ninten-Drawer unit, which comes fully assembled, as well as an extra nameplate, which goes here. These nameplates will actually be an open source design, so you can print your own and customize it to your heart's content. Rocker Gaming was kind enough to put my Macho Nacho logo here, and it really came out looking great. So that's a Ninten-Drawer kit. Pretty simple. Now since I'll be disassembling the NES, I'm going to go ahead and take this opportunity to install it into a clear retro game restore shell. That way we can actually see how the Ninten-Drawer works when it's fully installed. Okay, so that's the Ninten-Drawer kit. But before I show you how to go ahead and install it, let me tell you about the sponsor of today's video, PCBWay. If you have an idea for a new mod or want to assemble an open source project, PCBWay provides you with the tools to make them a reality. From 3D printing services in an array of materials, all the way to other services like CNC machining, injection molding, and of course PCB and flex ribbon fabrication. So when it comes to taking your retro mods to the next level, PCBWay is the place to make that happen. Check out the link in the description for PCBWay to get $5 off your first order, and again, a huge thank you to PCBWay for sponsoring this video. Anyway, now let's go ahead and install the Ninten-Drawer into the NES. Alright folks, so this should be a pretty straightforward install. We'll of course first take the NES apart, which is only held together with a few screws, so let's go ahead and do that first. With most of the screws out, the slot mechanism comes out pretty easily, but we still have a few more screws to remove. Great, with the motherboard free, we can carefully lift it out, but before we remove it completely, we need to disconnect two controller cables, as well as the larger power and reset button cable. With all the cables removed, we can lift off the lower RF shielding. All that's left to do now is remove the old 72-pin connector from the motherboard, and be careful, it is on there pretty tight, but it should come off. Great, now if you're planning to swap the shell on the NES like I am, then you can continue watching to see how I do that. Otherwise, if you're just going to install the Ninten-Drawer into the original shell, you can fast forward to the timestamp on screen. Here, I'm just removing a few of the components remaining in the original shell to swap them over to the new one. With everything removed, grab the new shell and start reinstalling things in reverse order. Now, one thing to be careful of is that all the screw posts in the new shell are not threaded. So when refastening the screws, it will be pretty difficult. Just make sure to go slowly and apply just enough downward force to ensure that you do not strip the heads of the screws. And of course, use the appropriate screwdriver size. Now before installing the Ninten-Drawer, I applied a small bit of deoxit to the 72-pin connector contacts to remove any oxidation and provide a thin layer of protection. This is completely optional and shouldn't be necessary, but I like doing this as a precaution. Next, let's grab the Ninten-Drawer as shown and flip it over with the 72-pin connector facing up. Then grab the motherboard oriented with the bottom facing up as well, and then insert it firmly into the Ninten-Drawer. And that's it, the Ninten-Drawer is installed. Super easy. Now all that's left to do is putting everything back into the console and reassembling the NES. Now one thing to keep in mind is that I am not reinstalling the RF shielding into the console. This is so that we can see the inner workings of the Ninten-Drawer, and I think it just looks a lot cooler. The RF shielding isn't entirely necessary to have, but you can reinstall it if you want. And again, if you're like me and you don't install the RF shielding back into the console, then you will not need to reuse the two screws that go here in the back, these two screws that go on the left side of the NES, and this one here near the controller connectors. Now, all that's left to do is to transfer over the retaining spring tabs for the cartridge door from the old top shell, and then put them into the new one. And lastly, drop on the top shell and button up the console. And there you have it, the Ninten-Drawer fully installed. Okay, so now that we got the Ninten-Drawer installed, let's go ahead and put in a game, and wait, it's not working. Okay, hold your horses. Remember that CIC lockout bypass chip that I mentioned earlier in the video? Well, it's currently not set to the correct region. So just hit the reset button a couple times until you see the game load. Once you do this, you never have to do it again. That is, unless you want to try and play games from another region. Anywho, now that we're all set up, I have to say that I absolutely love the results. The Ninten-Drawer was an absolute breeze to install, and honestly works extremely well and adds an overall premium feel to the NES experience. But don't take my word for it, let me show you as we go over all of its features. Okay, so we obviously know the Ninten-Drawer was designed for both giving a solid, reliable connection to the cart while also being easy to remove. It basically combined the ease of using an original NES ZIF connector, or zero insertion force, with the reliability of something like the blinking light win. So when it comes to operation, it of course slots in with a very firm bite to the cart, and stays in position thanks to the integrated magnets. But it's taken the cart out where the Ninten-Drawer really shines. What I like to do is pull the cart out, then with my thumbs hold the cart from the top, and then grab it from the bottom with my index fingers and slowly wedge the cart out. It does take a bit of force, but it comes out easily. Once you've done it a couple times, you get the hang of it and appreciate its meticulous design and ease of use. It almost feels like an authentic Nintendo piece of hardware. Now, the other feature that I alluded to earlier are these magnets, which pull the cart into position with a very satisfying click. This is such a cool idea and really adds a level of refinement to the overall feel of the connector. The magnets are inserted here, and the two steel bolts which are securing the cart PCB are what attract the magnets. It's honestly a very elegant design. And for those that are worried about the quality of this product, you can rest assured, because both Blue Shell and Rocker Gaming put their design through some pretty rigorous testing, with over 10,000 consecutive insert and removals of a cart, which at the end of all this testing still had a reliable connection. If you inserted and removed one game once a day for 10,000 days, that would amount to over 26 years. So I really do think this mod will last a long time. Now, another little detail is the flex cable here in the back, which allows for the sliding action. It too had quite a bit of thought behind it. When designing it, there needed to be a balance between the length of the cable as well as the bend radius. You see, the two bends on the connector are such that the cable itself won't fatigue, allowing for many expansions and contractions. And the cable is long enough to accommodate that required bend radius, but also not too long that it causes issues with reading games. If the ribbon cable was excessively long, we would see issues with the ability for games to work properly because the excessive length would cause issues with the signal paths. Now, on the topic of game compatibility, the Ninten-Drawer of course works fantastic with officially licensed Nintendo carts, but also with games that have historically had compatibility issues. Whether that's due to thinner than normal PCBs, custom CIC bypass architecture within the cartridge, or other lockout workarounds, the Ninten-Drawer has got you covered. Because of its clever design and custom PCBs, unofficial games like Tengen and Comerica titles work just as reliably. I've tested a few different unlicensed titles and didn't run into any issues. And speaking of game compatibility, the Ninten-Drawer incorporates a lockout bypass chip of its own. This allows for more games to work on the NES, as well as games from other regions such as PAL titles. So in terms of compatibility with games, I think we're pretty much covered. The Ninten-Drawer is basically a 72-pin connector that provides a solid top-loader-like connection to the cartridge, but is also easy to remove. So will a flash cart work? Yup. Games from other regions like Famicom carts with the appropriate adapter? Of course. The Crix RGB blaster? You bet. Although I'm not sure if it's the most practical application. And things like expanded audio, if your console is modded appropriately, will also work as well. Now, the last little feature I want to talk about is this nameplate here that can be customized and will actually be open source so folks can get creative and design and print your own. I'd be really interested to see what folks come up with here. Rocker Gaming made this custom Macho Nacho plate and it just looks fantastic. So those are really the major features of the Ninten-Drawer. It's honestly an over-engineered piece of kit, but that's what I love about it. You can really tell that both Rocker Gaming and Blue Shell 3D put a lot of thought into its design, and it definitely shows. So with that, let's go over the pros and cons. Starting with the pros, the biggest one for me is that once installed, it's easy and intuitive to use, and it just works. You get an absolutely solid connection without the death grip. The sliding action really allows you to get a good grip on the card, which is something that was sorely missing on previous solutions. On top of that, the incorporation of little touches like magnets to keep the card in place really add to the overall polish of this kit. Additionally, this is an easy mod to do yourself. Basically, you just remove a few screws and the old 72-pin connector and slap on the Ninten-Drawer. This is an extremely accessible mod that pretty much anyone can do. And probably the biggest pro is game compatibility, especially with notoriously incompatible games and unofficial titles. Now, it should be noted that while game compatibility is very good, there are a few out there that still won't work, many of which are even incompatible with original Nintendo hardware. Games known as the green band games have a design flaw on the pins which cause them to not work properly with cart readers. These are actually pretty rare and considered collector's items, but unfortunately they are part of a select few titles that aren't supported. Other than these extremely rare instances, the Ninten-Drawer provides a very high level of game compatibility. And lastly, priced at $50, I feel like this is a pretty good value for what you're getting. Given all the testing and design that went into the Ninten-Drawer itself, plus the added features like the magnetic latch and CIC lockout bypass, this is more than an over-engineered cart reader. It's a thoughtfully crafted piece of gaming hardware that enhances your NES experience with both functionality and ease of use. Overall, I think this is a fantastic cart reader replacement, especially if you're having issues getting your NES to read games. So, those are the pros. But now, let's get into the cons. And really, I couldn't think of any. If there was one thing I had to complain about, it's that the Ninten-Drawer still has a pretty tight grip on the cart. Now, I know that's done by design to provide the best connection possible, and that the sliding action gives you more than enough cart to grab onto to remove it. But it is still something that I noticed. Not a huge deal at all, and more of an observation. Other than that, there is really nothing to complain about. Sure, there may be the purists out there who really do enjoy the original cart connector style, but for me, the reliability that the Ninten-Drawer provides greatly outweighs that. So in conclusion, the Ninten-Drawer is an impressive upgrade for the NES, addressing long-standing issues with the original cartridge connector. Its thoughtful design, ease of installation, and enhanced features like the magnetic latch and CIC lockout bypass make it a standout modification. For $50, it offers excellent value, ensuring reliable game connections and a premium feel that enhances the overall NES experience. If you're looking to revive your NES with a dependable and easy-to-install solution, the Ninten-Drawer is a must-have upgrade. Now before I close out the video, I want to turn it back over to Rocker Gaming and Blue Shell 3D to give us a glimpse of what else they have in store for us in the near future.
Hey Tito, I want to thank you so much for checking out the Ninten-Drawer. We really appreciate it. Feel free to check out my Etsy and Twitter where I post an assortment of retro controllers and console and mods and accessories I've developed over the years. One project I'm deep into development on is a replacement N64 stick that I've dubbed the Renaissance, which aims to be a speedrunning quality N64 stick. Blue Shell, where can folks find more information about you?
You can find out about my other console accessories, mods, accessibility options, and game room tchotchkes under Blue Shell 3D on both Twitter and Printables, where I post about projects under development as well as publish 3D models you can print at home for free. Tito, back to you.
Awesome. Thank you both for sharing that with us and for joining me today on the show. An updated N64 analog stick is something that I can definitely get behind, so I'll be on the lookout for that. For more information on what Rocker Gaming and Blue Shell 3D are up to, I'll have links to where you can find them down below, so definitely check them out. Anyway folks, there you have it. The Ninten-Drawer cartridge connector for the NES. A fantastic, if not over-engineered, addition for your console. Now if you enjoyed this video, I really think you'll like this one here, so check it out. And as always, thank you all so much for tuning in today, and I'll catch you again next time.